Hello, everyone. We're live. Sorry if I'm a little blurry or far away. Got little camera issues today. You guys have anything to start with for a second while I try to fix that one more time?
I mean, I'm going to apologize for your soccer jersey, but otherwise, yeah.
Well, the ironic thing about this is not that it's a soccer jersey, that it's a Guinness jersey, because, I don't drink.
Well, I know a certain area in Western New York that would like to imbibe in numerous pints of Guinness because their football team lied to them 2 weeks ago. Everybody thought that this team was good, and then they revealed themselves to be the joke of the NFL that they have always been.
Yeah, I mean, it's right now it's weird. There's just so many mediocre to bad teams in the NFL that, as a fan, you get excited because, like, even the Jets, right? They had won 4 games, and you think, oh, well, now they're playing a team with 2 wins. They should be able to go 500 at the break. They can't do it. You think, you look at Buffalo and you say, all right, we know that New Orleans is playing well, but we've got this record. We should be able to hang in there, and they get torched. Like, literally, I want to say in the NFL, there's probably 4 to 5 teams that are a threat to win the Super Bowl, and that's about it.
Well, I mean, Kevin said it before we went live that, parity, people talk about the NHL with parity. The NFL, I think parity is almost debilitating in the NFL because other than the very few teams, this league, it's a bunch of flawed average teams that one week they look great and the next week they look like crap.
Yeah, and that's so well put. I mean, it is amazing how in the NFL, I mean, I remember when I was a kid that it was always like a running joke, Peter Rozelle on any given Sunday. Yeah, that's the way it seems to be. And it has everything to do with the schemes now in NFL. Like almost all the players are, because they're so well schooled and the schemes are so sophisticated that, you could just sort of plug in one great athlete and he goes down, and you plug in another great athlete and they and then suddenly the game's just so even. It's absolutely amazing.
Well, you could move this argument to hockey when it comes to number 1 centers or number 1 goaltenders, but there are so few quality quarterbacks in the NFL that I think and then some of them get hurt, and then you're the second and third stringers. I mean, for Kevin, you mentioned Aaron Rodgers, but like in Buffalo with Tyrod Taylor, the last 2 weeks, the defenses that faced the Bills basically said all we have to do with Tyrod Taylor is make sure that he stays in the pocket. Meaning he's a lousy quarterback who can't throw 15 yards, so we have to make him be a quarterback, and then we know he can beat the Bills. You can take that argument with number 1 pitchers in baseball, number 1 goaltenders, number 1 centers. There's not enough of them to. I think
I'm going to change the argument just slightly, just to say the problem with the NFL is 99.9% of the teams run the same offense, and when you have a league, and it never used to be like that. Like growing up, there were even in the 80s, there were a few teams that ran the West Coast, and other teams did their own thing. Now everybody runs it. So a lot of times when you're seeing quarterbacks, they all have to be good at the West Coast offense. It doesn't mean that makes them a great quarterback. A lot of times you have to get the most studious guy just because there's too many plays. I just think that's what's killing the NFL is there's no offensive creativity. They're all running variations of the same offense, and it makes no sense to me.
So maybe go ahead, Ken.
Well, I was just going to say too. I mean, I just going to sound ridiculous, but I wonder why we haven't seen NFL teams employ someone with psychological skills, a magician, because no, I'm serious, because the sophistication has reached such a point in these offenses now that all you're really trying to do is to get like a linebacker take 1 half step to his right. So you can run a quick counter to the left. Like when you run the running, it's so amazing now. Like, and now almost every team runs that fake a wide receiver reverse,
right?
Basically, just to get the linebacker to take a half step. Like that's all they're trying to do. Is one half step to the right, just to freeze them for a second, because that's all they need to squeeze that tailback. If you can get him to go 1 step to the right, then you can run him, off your right tackle. It's so
You're right. You know
Amazing.
what's so funny is like I grew up going to Delaware football games in college where they ran this wing tip or something like that. I
No,
forget.
wing T. I was just about to say, let's
Yeah.
Right,
yeah,
the
let's go.
wing
Let's
tee,
go
right?
back to the wing T with Steve Fuller and Marv Levy.
Right, so that's what Delaware ran. So that's what guys like, Rich Comlo in Detroit, and then Jeff Comlo in Detroit, Rich Gannon, Steve Bruner, and then even to Flacco. These guys were all Delaware quarterbacks who ran that. And and you can. What's fun about? I mean, I'm not as big a football fan as you guys are, but obviously right now, I'm into the Philadelphia thing because
Yeah.
who could that be, right? I mean, Carson Wentz is such a great quarterback to watch. You can't get around it. I met the guy. He's a HockeyBuzz fan, so there's a big cheer thing. So I'm a big fan of Carson Wentz. But he's like you said, Kevin. He's actually pretty incredible at those fakes. Like some of the fakes that come out of that is such a skill. Just that magician aspect of things. Quarterbacks that have it, just it blows your mind.
Well, I mean, the thing is that, I mean, back in the day, a quarterback being able to fake, like Boomer Esiason was great at the play action pass, and that bought him time.
Right.
And I think that, and I think this goes across the board in all sports. The rush to get players into the NHL or the NBA or the NFL or Major League Baseball at a younger age, you lose that. That intangible thing where players learn little things that give them an advantage in games. There's the raw talent is there, but it takes them a number of years to sort of develop that intangible thing. And, like a guy like Boomer Esiason, he probably won some games because he was able to fake out the opposition. And
yeah, I like Kevin's idea with the magician if they could use that with the referees. So this way, when they go to pull a flag, to call a flag, they just keep pulling out a flag, keep pulling out a flag, keep pulling out a flag, and then they can't actually do their job because they don't do their job well anyhow.
With the first pick of the draft, the Cleveland Browns select Chris Angel.
Russ, I got to ask you this question just because I've followed with great humor your misery over your Jets. Have you ever sat down and said, of all your, like, sports is your life, and as it is mine. And I would say that I spend, as much as, I'm a fan of some teams and I cover others and everything, but I spend most of my, I would say, fandom and association with sports as I'm happy 90% of the time or more. Like I very, very rarely get upset. I got to know what your percentage is because it can't be anywhere. It's got to be around 50. I mean,
I think it's around 50, 55.
Because I've just seen you, and the things just irritate you.
I'm a happy person, but then the sports part is what drags me down.
That's too optimistic for me. It's probably like 10-90. Very rarely do I get happy because Buffalo teams and the team other than like the Yankees, there's just misery. It's across the board.
Now, if you were not a reporter, would you be happy 90% of the time? Like I think that's something.
Yes. Yeah, I would be because here's the difference. Like I want my teams to win, sure, but I don't. I've never had the great anger over losing that others have, and it may be a flaw. I mean, maybe that was to be honest with you, because when I was a kid, I just couldn't. I just can't muster the oh my God, it's the end of the world.
Being a reporter has saved me because it's gotten the focus completely off my team. I can't be completely focused on teams that I grew up with. So now I have an escape to get away from them, and that's the escape.
I'm not even talking about hockey, but I think just because obviously hockey, Kevin's covering hockey, but the idea of like once you cover one sport, does that make you a different kind of fan in other sports?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, my people would comment when my kids were all high school athletes, and when I sit at the and watch high school soccer or high school volleyball years ago, and when even my son played college, like I just can't change. Like I can't stand up and cheer and
right.
It's just who I am now. Right. So yeah, I agree with
that. Definitely plays into it. It played in my. I mean, I became a fan. The one thing I know is the more I covered hockey, I'm still admittedly, I'm going to still admit to being a Flyers fan because I grew up going to every game from the time I was 5. So it's impossible not to be a Flyers fan when they're in the even when they're in the Stanley Cup. But I can still pull against them. I mean, I can still predict against them. I've managed to do that. But what I've really managed to do is become fans of players over time I've been in hockey. Like that's really what, and I think that's what we all kind of feel like. Certain guys who are just so great that when they play for your team, you just meet them, get to talk to them, and then root for whatever team they're playing on wherever they are.
Yeah,
become a big team in certain players, and that's just way more so. And then at times, there's some Flyers teams where I just didn't relate to any of the guys, so I felt like I was having a hard time rooting for that team, and that's when it becomes tricky when you have your at least my family, who's always has crazy Flyers parties and stuff like that. I'm like, I just can't get into this team. I don't know what it is. I just can't get in. It's like there's something about there's no one on the team that really.
I think you can, as I've covered the Leafs now for almost 10 years for Hockey Buzz, and I think you can. And now being covering games, I think you can still be a fan. You just can't act like one, and you have to make sure that you treat things not with that passion or that hurt that a fan has, but you have to look at things objectively, and that's what I've been able to do. Is I look at the team not with that the fandom, that passion, but I look at it sort of objectively.
Well, I think the more you get into a team, too, the less of the more you cover, the deeper you get into covering a team, the less of a fan you become, sort of naturally as well, because you actually start to see real things that you're mad about, like you would actually like the real disagreements you'd have, like, oh, that guy just that doesn't make any sense to me, or things like that. And it's fun, like, because every year I try to go with my mom to a game to kind of like carry on the tradition. So I'll sit in the crowd, at a Flyers game, and and it's hard, it's impossible for me to be like, can't do it.
You can't turn your brain off.
No, you can't. There's no way of doing it. It's really funny. It does affect you in interesting ways.
I think most reporters give up their rooting interest in teams, but what they gain is rooting interest in players. I have found during my career that I don't really have any rooting interest other than my own. Like, I root for whatever positively benefits my life.
We've talked about this.
I mean, whatever.
I've had great discussions on this one. Go ahead.
And it just irritates some people, but it's the ease of the travel that I'm rooting for, or something that I just wanted to see because I think it'll be a cool matchup. But what's happened over time is people who have treated me well, players and are good storylines and just nice people, I want them to succeed. There's just been players.
I really think this show would have been different if the Browns would have won yesterday, but that's just my
Wow.
Really quick before we start, the funny thing
I think Kevin would have had a different attitude.
So I don't know, you probably don't remember this, but the first Stanley Cup final I covered was the Carolina-Edmonton final. And in game,
I do remember that. I got to stop you because you will not remember this, but you know what I remember about that? You tried to guess who was going to play goal by what was happening in practice, and I was trying to find. You have no experience whatsoever in this. And you remember what you asked me? You said, "Well, how do you know?" Because I predicted who was going to think, and I said, "Well, I asked Jim Matheson."
Like, oh, that's right.
That's exactly how that conversation went. You were trying to figure out based on what was happening in practice.
I was
I walked over and said to Jimmy, "Who's going to start?" And of course, I was right and you were wrong.
No, you were totally right. No, but then the funny moment came in after game 3, because that series was 3-1. After game 4, it was 3-1, right? And and I was at the party or wherever it was, the after dinner, and I said, this series is going 7, and you looked at me like you were absolutely totally pissed off me. And I said, no, this is going 7, even though it's 3-1. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's like you say, that's like the travel, which turned out to be a hellish thing too. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, a lot of my stories I remember about covering the Leafs, a lot of them have to do with the travel. I remember once when in the early years when the Oilers were dominant. In fact, I know specifically it was the 87, because that one went 7-2 after it was 3-1. And everybody was trying to go home. Well, there were very few flights out of Edmonton in 1987. Only a couple of days that flew through Minneapolis on Northwest. And the plane that we were on, everybody was going home after a long 7-game series. And they starting out by offering like a $200 voucher. And if someone would get off, because they had like 10 people that still were trying to get on. And most of this plane was filled full of people who had covered the series. Nobody budged. They went up to a full ticket. Nobody budged. And they were offering like a free round trip ticket anywhere in the world and like $500. And they still only got 4 or 5 people.
I have so little trust for the airlines. I never accept those deals. I get off the plane. I don't move.
Get out of Edmonton.
It probably got to what Roger Goodell is asking for in his new contract, a private jet for life, and they wouldn't get off.
Oh, that's so funny. All right, let's get going here. That's good stuff. We can just, a lot of this is hockey stuff anyway. So anyway, hello, Hockey World. Today is Monday, November 13th, 2017.
I'm Michael Agello.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Kevin Allen from USA Today Sports.
And I'm Eklund. You're watching HockeyBuzzcast on HockeyBuzz.com. This is a podcast that comes to you every Monday through Friday at this time, actually, today, for real. We've been all over the map lately. To bring you the hockey news, the comings and goings in the hockey world. And we're going to talk about the Hall of Fame today to begin with. And Mike, you were up there for the big ceremonies. What were your thoughts on the whole thing?
Well, I mean, the actual ceremony is tonight, but the press conference was on Friday, and I was just struck by the class. I mean, Teemu Selanne is to my mind was a no doubt Hall of Famer.
Yeah.
I know I did hear some critique of guys like Andreychuk and Mark Recchi as them being compilers, and that's a term that's been brought up in baseball, and I think is now sort of morphed into hockey. And I saw Dave Andreychuk from the first time he played hockey with the Sabres in 1980, drafted by Scotty Bowman in 1982, through to when he played with Toronto after the trade and scoring 50 goals a couple times. I mean, was he ever the best left winger in the NHL? No, but he was a very good left winger for over 20 years. And, at the end of his career was a role player, was a leader, won a Stanley Cup with Tampa. I don't buy into this compiler stuff. I mean, to me, it's a feat that some of these players last as long and play as effectively as they do. And, Recchi wins the Stanley Cup in Boston in 2011, and Andreychuk was an effective player for as long as he was. I think it was overdue to get Andreychuk in the Hall of Fame. I think they're both deserving.
I think there is a compiler factor, though. People will tell you with like Dick Duff, that's when you sort of look at the compiler thing. But I thought Andreychuk deserved it. I mean, I covered that Tampa series. There's no way, and I covered pretty much every game. Not the Calgary games, every game in Tampa. There was no way they were winning without Andreychuk. Like, there's just no possible way. Like, he was the leader. He was the guy in the crease. He was causing problems. He was really the biggest, reason they won. Korea was always amazing, just how classy he was, and him at the University of Maine, like, they'll never have college hockey numbers like that again. Like, it's just crazy off the chart scoring numbers that he had were just legendary. And Selanne, I'm pretty confident in saying that 76 goal rookie record will never be broken. Like, I feel very good about that. But he impressed me more, like, whatever year the All-Star game was in Dallas, he was there, and I was interviewing him for a while, and he was just in like a T-shirt, and I just couldn't believe the shape this guy was in, and he was already getting to that back nine of his career, and I was like, wow, this is why this guy is so great, is because this guy has literally dedicated himself to the sport 100%. And so that's, usually the case with a lot of the guys.
What are your thoughts, Kevin, on Andreychuk in Korea?
Well, I agree with Russ. Compiling certainly does exist, and we have seen it in the past, and it will continue. But I have no problem with seeing the greatness in being a superior compiler. And that's what Andreychuk and Recchi were. We've seen it. I mean, like Mike Gardner was in that class. Mike Gardner had incredible numbers, and people said, yeah, but he was never viewed as that go-to guy. Like he was a dangerous player, but you didn't see him as a playoff guy. Well, but he scored 30 goals every year, and that was his greatness. His greatness was in the consistency of his performance level. It was remarkable. When you see it.
Teams too.
Yeah, and Andreychuk early in his career was a very dominant player, and part of Recchi's greatness certainly was his longevity and his impact on his team in terms of his dressing room aura as well. But I did want to just mention about Selanne in Korea. I really love that they're going in together because they were such great friends and they were such polar opposites of the way they dealt with everything. Solani was happy-go-lucky in his approach with the media, and Korea is one of those guys who didn't like to talk on game days, who had to get his game face on. He was Solani tell me the story about the first time that he was in a dressing room in between periods. He came on and he turned on a tennis tournament on the television in between periods to watch what was going on. And Korea said, "What are you doing?" And he said, "Well, I'm watching a tennis tournament." And Korea just couldn't believe that he could focus. But anybody who knew Solani, like this guy, even though we think of the artistry of Solani's game because he was so fast and so much fun to watch, but I viewed him as a true warrior. Like when you look at the way he played in international competition in particular, like, he led his team like into battle. I remember in the Olympics, he got his multiple teeth knocked out, and I remember afterward he basically said, asked him how he was. It's just teeth. I'm like, it's like no big deal. And Solani is one of those people that we mentioned before we went on, people you rooted for. I always rooted for Solani because he treated everyone with respect.
He did.
He was one of the most likable people in the entire league. Yeah. And I don't know that anyone ever had a bad word to say about Solani. So this is a real great class. Goyette is a terrific, she was, in America, we sort of know about Granado and Karen Bai and Ruggiero as the top, women's players. And, now there's Hillary Knight and a bunch of others. But in Canadian hockey history, Goyette is right up there as well. So that's a very important addition.
I wanted to add one thing about Gardner because I think this would have helped his career. I mean, Mike Keenan literally traded him at the last possible second. Gardner is still mad about it to this day, but he's such a classy guy, he rarely talks about it. I did interview him about it, and it hurt him, and you could tell. And had that not happened, the Rangers still would have won the Stanley Cup, and then Mike Gardner, I think, would have been thought of differently, to be honest.
Yeah, but he scored 30 goals at age 37. I mean, he scored 30 goals with the Phoenix Coyotes after he scored at 30 with the Leafs. So the guy was a phenomenal goal scorer and consistent. I don't think consistency and okay, maybe you weren't the best player at the time, but you were one of the top players in the league, and you performed consistently for a lengthy period of time. I think that's admirable, and it's worthy of being acknowledged. Now, the one thing I always remember about Solani and Korea was the fact that they both took less money to go to Colorado for 1 year.
Yeah.
Which I don't think we know that Parise and Suter went to Minnesota, but they didn't take less money, and they didn't go for 1 year. They both got max deals. These guys, I think they wanted to play together, and they wanted to win a Stanley Cup, and they took less money to go and play in Colorado. And it didn't work, but I think they liked playing with each other, and they decided they wanted to do that. And that's one of the things I respect about them.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that. I mean, consistency is absolutely, like, just in general. I mean, when you think about people who play in different eras and they're putting 30 goals up, that's the other thing that, there's the hockey changed the entire time Gartner and Andreychuk were in the league. I mean, it changed from, clutch and grab to wide open hockey, back to clutch and grab to wide open hockey again. I mean, and they still managed. And I think it's much harder to be consistent like that than it is to have one just incredible year where you catch fire and suddenly you're the best guy in the league. That to me is such a big thing. The one thing you guys have put it all really in great perspective with Solani and Korea, but the one thing I hung up my Korea Nashville Predators jersey back there. And the reason I did that was he didn't have a long time in Nashville, and it was, maybe not, he didn't do a whole lot there, I guess, in terms of, what you would think, taking them to the promised land or whatever. But them getting Paul Kariya at the time when I was talking to people in Nashville was such a big deal. It was such a big deal that somebody like that a player of that caliber would come and play in Nashville meant so much to them at the time that, that really can't be understated how important that was. Talking to people around the team when that happened, it was the happiest, I've seen a lot of those people in the entire time I've been friends with people around Nashville. You know what I mean, Kev?
You're completely right about that. I mean, it really changed how we viewed the Predators because, the ability to recruit top players, it gave legitimacy and credibility to the franchise that he was willing to go there. He saw that as a destination that he wanted to to be at. So I couldn't agree more. And he was such an intellectual player as well. Like you could have really sophisticated discussions about the sport with Paul Correa.
And just to put it in perspective, the year he won the Hobie Baker, in 39 games with the University of Maine, 25 goals, 75 assists.
Yeah, you'll never see that again.
That's incredible.
College hockey too. I mean, that had a huge effect on college hockey.
It did. It was a massive effect because it's not like Maine was like a world beater or anything. He put them on the map.
It's interesting that Correa did this twice in his career, kind of went to odd places, going to Maine, going to Nashville. You know, he went there and actually did have sort of the same kind of effect in both situations, because college hockey before that was really, you know, anybody who was a great Canadian player was going to go play with a great Canadian junior team. You know, that was what was going to happen.
Yeah.
No, weren't going to go play for the University of Maine. And, you know, a superstar wasn't going to go play for the Nashville Predators. And it's kind of, it's not so surprising that Correa has had like even a less than normal after hockey life either. He just kind of, definitely does his own thing, and that's what that is what he is. You know, he'd be a fascinating.
I don't think anybody even knows what his thing is, because he has never really revealed that.
No one knows. I mean, you hear rumors about like that he's the funniest rumor I heard, which I'm sure you guys have heard as well, but that he's like become this ping pong player aficionado in California, and like will challenge any and all comers from like around the world to play him in ping pong.
I haven't heard that, but clearly on the Hall of Fame call, which I was on, they had to get him in from surfing.
Yeah, yeah. When the four players are being interviewed by Ron McLean on Friday, or it was on Saturday actually. They had pictures of Correa like on a board surfing. So it was like a scene out of Point Break. So I guess that's what he enjoys to do in his post hockey career. And God bless him.
But here's the one thing: every time the Hall of Fame comes up, the one thing that becomes painfully obvious to me is that there's not enough goalies in the Hockey Hall of Fame. Yeah,
no, it's so true, isn't it? The way the goalie, I mean, what goalies could have been in this year? What was missed?
Well, the one that I know that of the old time goalies who's been ignored, and I know this is courtesy of Jeff Merrick because he's mentioned this many a time, was Lauren Shabbat. If you look at his career stats. I think is probably deserving. You know, he's up there in terms of, you know, like guys like Hainsworth and, you know, then the later generation of Sawchuk.
Yeah, we wrote about Shabbat in our Ranger books, and he was tremendous.
Yeah.
Well, I think it also has to be noted that we're talking about goalies in the era where a lot of the goalies will be going to Hall of Fame now were in the era where goals were being scored. Well,
my own personal, you know, and here's where I'm trying to separate fandom from being objective, but I think Curtis Joseph is a Hall of Famer. I've always thought that. I thought
he's close because I think he really is on the edge. He is.
And you know, yeah. Kevin,
yeah, I'm with you.
On Curtis Joseph, what are your thoughts on Curtis Joseph being in Hall of Fame?
I'd have to vote no, but you know, I'd have to look at it. I mean, you do have to sit down. Yeah, I've always felt that if you say the name, you should really know whether he's a Hall of Famer, and my gut feeling would be no on him. But saying that, I'd really want to look at all the you know, numbers and see where he stacked up in comparison. I mean, you know, it's the same thing. It's the same argument with Chris Osgood, who also has had you know, people who think he should be in and have.
He deserves a chance as well. I mean, these are tough votes. I mean, and it is.
Well, what about in 2019? Will Tim Thomas's name come up? I mean, he had a short career, but it was an amazing, dominant time that he had.
I don't think Tim Thomas is a Hall of Famer.
I think that the
I'm a big Tim Thomas fan.
Right, but I think the Chick-fil-A thing and the White House thing would probably be, you know.
I don't know.
I think that would hurt him.
But I mean, Vezina should mean something.
Yeah, I know. And for a couple years there, Tim Thomas was the best goalie in the league. No question there.
I agree.
You know, and
not long enough.
Okay, that's fair. That's why I brought his name up, just to see. I think the not long enough is fair, but I think he's a guy at least worthy of being talked about. That's all.
I mean, you know, if you want to go the Stanley Cup route, do you go Mike Vernon, you know, Chris Osgood, like you mentioned, Kevin? I mean, you know, you can make arguments for some goaltenders like that based on how many Stanley Cups they won, but for those who don't win Stanley Cups, how many wins they have. And that's why, you know, Joseph, I mean, it's an argument, and you're right. If it doesn't immediately pop to mind, yes, Hall of Famer, then that might be a reason to say no.
Yeah, it's a reason like Mike Richter's not in. Like a lot of people say, hey, there's a lot of different things he did internationally.
Yeah, I think Richter should be because of USA and the Rangers.
He doesn't.
Well, he's got a World Cup. He's got a Stanley Cup. He's but there's so many players. Like Jeremy Roenick is not in.
That's. I was just reading through your Jeremy Roenick book the other day. I was really great book. Something JR book is really something. This is the question now. So goalie wise, are there any goalies in the league right now that are Hall of Famers?
Lundqvist is a Hall of Famer.
Yeah, Lundqvist for sure.
Yep.
Renee might be.
Jonathan Quick might be.
Quick might be too. I think those.
Well, Carey Price.
And Price, yeah.
Price, Lundqvist.
Yeah, but okay, we'll Carey
goalies right now that are playing. There's a long period of time where there were no real like definitive goalies.
Right, but Carey Price's Bonafides for the Hall of Fame be affected by the fact that he doesn't win a Stanley Cup? Because right now, I mean, he's won 2.
Lundqvist doesn't have a cup yet either.
Right. Oh, I know. You can make the same argument.
Both have been so dominant, and especially on the world stage, and even the most valuable players on their teams for such a long time too. That just like, to me,
I think those are the 4. I can't think of anybody else that's really.
Ryan Miller.
Miller, I think, would come up short.
Who are the 4 you have? You have Quick, Lundqvist, Price.
Quick, Lundqvist, Price, and maybe Renee.
What about Corey Crawford?
Crawford's going to be the guy that will get talked about like Vernon and everything else, and he is having an amazing year this year.
That's good, or
yeah. How about Luongo? I mean, Luongo. How about Luongo? I mean,
Luongo's no.
Well, I think Luongo is in the Curtis Joseph territory.
He is. He's in the Curtis Joseph area.
Here's 2 other names, and obviously with one of them, we have not yet to see the length of his career because he's only been in the league for 2 years. But 2 Stanley Cup victories for Matt Murray is a pretty good start.
And
Marc-Andre Fleury.
Fleury, I don't think will make it, although I think there'll be an argument. But I think
he's going to be like Chris Osgood. Like it's still the verdict is still out on Osgood, and I think because there's still time on him, and the same will be said of Fleury and some of those.
If Fleury was the architect for all of them, he'd be in. But he wasn't truly the guy. And when they brought up Lon Shabbat, like he had won at least 2 cups. I think he won 1 with the Rangers and 1 somewhere else.
1 with the Leafs, I believe.
Right. So like he's not even in for 2 Stanley Cups. So Stanley Cups is clearly not the biggest answer either there.
How far away is Braden Holtby?
Too far.
Yeah.
It's too early to know. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Let me ask something to Kevin, because I watched a number of games last night, and Russ and I were discussing last week the Chicago Blackhawks. If you look at their defense right now, Kev, without Yarmulson and with a bunch of guys who I think, we still don't know what like Gustav Forsling and Kempny are. Duncan Keith is not old, but he's got a lot of wear on his tires. Brent Seabrook is not looking like the Brent Seabrook of old, and they're giving up boatloads of goals. I think this has got to be a concern for Stan Bowman.
I couldn't agree more. And I think they knew this coming in too. Like this was going to be a transitional year. I think the hope is that Quenneville is so picky about his defense and that he could somehow work some magic and, get it together. But, they knew what was going on. They tried to make an adjustment with, the trades they made that, they hoped were going to kind of offset it, but they're clearly not the team they were in the past, and you're right on the money. It's on the defensive end where they're really struggling, in my mind. They just don't have personnel.
Seabrook's too slow, and they picked up just too many European free agent defensemen that are okay. But they, when you get those guys, they are certainly okay in the skating and puck moving department. But then they usually, pale everywhere else. And they become just like these generic defensemen, and their defense is vanilla. It just is.
There's no question that, to me, like the 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th defensemen on a team are only as good as the first 2 are.
Yeah.
To me, if you have two really solid defensemen, suddenly Trevor Van Riemsdyk looks serviceable. Suddenly other good defensemen look like they are good enough to play. But the second you don't have two solid defensemen up front, everybody starts to look different. It's just it's interesting.
It really does come down to the cohesiveness of the defense too. I mean, look at everybody watched the Penguins last spring and into June, and no Chris Letang, and the group they had there, that's not wasn't a world caliber defense. But the guys were all playing well at the right time, and everybody was concentrating on what they did best, and not taking chances, and kind of all work together. And I think you're seeing a lot of teams now that are sort of embracing that kind of same mentality. They're just hoping they have the right group, the right mix, that they can convince people to buy into, not trying to do more than they can do, and hope for the best. And it's working for some teams, but not for others.
Well, that's where I think the success, the three of the most successful teams right now early in the season have been Tampa Bay, St. Louis, and Los Angeles. I saw LA in person, and they roll. Doughty is world class. He's one of the best defensemen in the league. But your 2, 3, and 4 on that team are Martinez and Muzzin, and now Forbert has moved into the top 4 and is a good complement. Now, maybe he's not a number 4 defenseman on some teams, but he fits well with what they're doing. In Tampa, they add Girardi as a shot blocking guy, but you've got Hedman as the number 1 and Strawman, and then they have some young guys. Slater Cuckoo has sort of stepped up. Those teams, they all have one thing in common: their defense is deep. And they have the number 1 guy like Pietrangelo in St. Louis, but it's not just all him. There's a 2, there's a 3, there's a 4, and those teams, they have that bedrock, they have that foundation, and they can build out from that. And a lot of teams out there don't have that kind of depth on the blue line.
And to what Kevin's saying, you talk about you look at, like you're talking about in LA, those top 3 guys have played together a lot.
Yes.
They played a lot together over the years. So even if Martinez is not, maybe up to the other 2, he's still played with the other 2 enough that the other 2.
Martinez is a good player though too.
Yeah.
I think he's underrated. I bet Russ agrees with me on that too.
Yeah, no, I totally believe Martinez is underrated. And speaking of underrated, I wanted to talk a little bit about my blog today, which was sort of trying to figure out pretenders versus contenders here. So what I put out to the fan base today, and to get their opinions, is surprise teams in both directions. The first question I asked is, what surprise team currently in the playoffs won't make the playoffs? And so I put the surprise teams of Vegas, the Devils, the Islanders, the Jets, and the Kings. Okay, because I think if you look at those 5 teams, a lot of those 5 teams weren't in the playoffs when people were prognosticating in the beginning. Obviously, Vegas wasn't in New Jersey. I mean, people were picking them to be the bottoms of their conferences.
Right.
But the Islanders, Winnipeg, and the LA Kings. I mean, obviously, now the fan base here, of course, they all went with Vegas. As based, 1,200 votes, 60%, 61% were.
Yeah, I'd have to go with that too, just because.
Yeah.
The Islanders or the Islanders, I guess I would say.
The Islanders, right? So the Islanders are just the Islanders, of course, are on the edge of the playoffs, but they're still in it right now. So.
I would say the Islanders, because their goaltending is still not settled, although they're scoring goals lately, but.
Yeah.
No, they do, and it is funny about the whole John Tavares situation. You never know how that's going to affect the team, and it should affect this team because Tavares is such an important player for that organization, and yet it hasn't seemed to have.
No, I mean they're definitely winning games, but the goaltending, if you were to ask Doug Waite who's his number 1, I don't think he knows.
Yeah. No, that's fair. I am kind of rooting for the Vegas Golden Knights as long as we're talking about rooting. I'd like to see them do well.
Sure, why not? I mean, I think them doing well is good for the league. I mean, there's no question about that.
And it's good for the foundation of that franchise. But then I just wait for the moment of reality to set in where midway through the season, if they're 2 points out of a playoff spot and they have the opportunity to flip James Neal for 3 young assets.
Yeah, I don't think it's going to happen.
Yeah, I don't think so either.
Yeah.
Telling people I don't think it's going to happen. And the crazy thing about this is that if we had said this, ahead of time that they were going to be right here and they were going to be without Marc-Andre Fleury for most of it, that would be insane. I mean, the fact that the only chance that they had, and everybody's, in my mind at least, was that Marc-Andre Fleury would steal games from them or keep them close into games, right? That's where they would manage. And they've gone to 4 goalies at this point.
Well, not a necessity.
But how can you go 4 goalies and be in the playoffs? Any team, right.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. But I'll tell you one thing that's really changed in Vegas that I think they hoped would happen, but and that is that the players absolutely love it there.
Yeah.
Like James Neal is already on record as saying that he wants to re-up. I would bet if you did
I don't think he felt that way when he went there.
Well, I don't know what he thought when he went there, but I know that's what he feels now. And I bet if you went, that I would say 90% of the players would like to extend there because the quality of living, life there is excellent. They like the organization. The guys love playing for Gallant, who's a real players coach, and he's not a. I remember when he was there and he was talking about the power play, and someone was asking him about, the power play was on one of those 1 of 20, and he didn't criticize the question, but he basically said, I know why you're asking me that, but honestly, I just don't get involved in the numbers. I want to know the number I care about is my team winning,
right?
And how things look. And he goes, I look at my power play and I like how it looks, and the numbers will come, But I thought it was refreshing, and I think the players like that he doesn't, if you're putting in the effort and you're working hard, he's okay with you because he figures it'll all even out the numbers. So
yeah, it may very well be that a guy like Neal, who's a UFA, will re-sign. But if they fall out of the playoff race, and that's a big if right now because they're playing so well, and they're playing with Maxime Lagacé right now in goal. But if they fall out of the race, they fall behind. There's nothing preventing them from trading James Neal and then re-signing him in the summer. They have so many.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, Mike, because the problem is there's too many examples of players that said that was going to happen and then they never come back. So,
right. And the other situation that goes on is there is a lot of time after the trade deadline in the NHL season. And that players can go to another team and like it there, or just keeping this team together, even if it's just battling out of the playoffs. If you want this team's cohesiveness next year, keeping them together for that last part of the season is important too. Just like, I think people will see that. I talked to a scout who really nailed it the other day about I said, what do you think the Vegas Knights are? Why do you think they are this? Every year he says, take like the Buffalo Sabres or the Maple Leafs in the past, teams that were out of the playoffs early on, and had nothing to play for, and really there was no pressure on them. And they would be these great spoilers down the stretch. He's like, the Vegas Knights have nothing to play for from the beginning of the season, and that's how they're treating it. So there's no pressure on them whatsoever. So they go into these games and they can be the great spoiler from the beginning of the season, and that's why you're seeing what you're. I thought that kind of was really accurate. Just go ahead.
I was gonna say, here's a question. I unless you're not done with the subject, that I'd like to pose to Kevin.
No, I have the other direction too, which I'd like to get to, but go ahead, you start. Go ahead.
All right, I was just going to say, right now there's a interesting situation going on with like the Tucson Roadrunners. You have Dylan Strome, Nick Merkley, and Lawson Krause, all guys who are at a point a game or more than a point a game, and they're a team that could easily win the Calder Cup, and nobody would say boo. Now, a lot of times when teams win the Calder Cup, the NHL franchise benefits. I mean, we've seen this with Tampa. We've seen it with a lot of different teams. Buffalo after the lockout.
Definitely Columbus.
But I'm not sure. Is Arizona going to benefit? Because they don't have a franchise goalie down there, and it just seems within their plethora of guys that now, unless they get the franchise goalie, they could be last place again next year or close to last. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I think the big question they now have is this start has not been what they expected. Like they expected their defense would carry them. Like that defense should be pretty good.
It should be,
and it hasn't been good.
Yeah.
So the big question is, do you bring those younger players up? Like they thought Dylan Strome would benefit greatly by staying down there, but now you have to be wondering, would it be better if they bring up those guys and just put them in the lineup and take their lumps, try to get a early draft pick yet again, and have him next year. I mean, look at what Heischer has done for the Devils. And would they be better off to do that? And would Dylan Strom benefit? I mean, that's always the big question. Are you better off, struggling a little bit, but learning in the NHL or going to the AHL and being a top player? It's never. I think it varies from player to player, to be honest with you.
You could argue that what the Leafs did when they finished dead last and kept guys like Nylander and Connor Brown and Zach Hyman down in the AHL, and they went to the conference final, that benefited them because I think they were ready to step in the NHL the next year. I mean, maybe you want to shelter Merkley and guys like Strome from how bad the Coyotes are right now. But when I look at the Coyotes, and the thing I'm concerned about is Yarmulson and Ekman-Larsson, that top pairing, they're both free agents after next year. And, I don't know what's in the mind of Oliver Ekman-Larsson, but if it's me, and I've spent my entire career since being drafted in 2009 with a team that made the playoffs once, I don't know if I want to throw away my prime years on a team that may never get anywhere. So, I mean, I think that Chaika has got to be thinking proactively here, and either at the deadline or at the draft next June in Dallas, maybe consider what he has to do with these defensemen, because I don't think they're going to re-sign in Arizona. I really don't.
But Mike, you always think about trades first. That's just your mentality. But I don't think that. When you're trying to sell a franchise, I mean, you're still trying to create some sort of bond with a fan base there, and you don't have a new arena yet. There's so much going on. Like I just think it goes from bad to worse if you lose Ekman-Larsson and stuff. I think you got to work to keep him and to sign him, not just trade him off and say to your fans, "Well, we lost again."
Well, if he wants to stay there, Kevin, then that's great. Then they work on getting him getting him the extension, giving him what he needs to stay there. It's just I'm looking at him like from his point of view and like what he wants to do. If he wants to win a Stanley Cup in his career, if he wants to, I think he's a first level all-star on the level of Carlson and Doughty, but because he's in Arizona, I don't think he gets the recognition that he deserves. And I think he would, if he was playing in a Montreal or a Toronto or a New York, he would get that respect.
Well, he hasn't played like that this season, that's for sure.
No.
He has really had an off season. And I think what is true, what you said is that if he informs them that there's no way, then yeah, of course you have to consider it. But I've not heard any such discussion. Like I've never heard him suggest, or even in an undercurrent, that he wanted to leave. And I think they've got to just figure out, like, that defense should be better than it is.
Yes.
So I guess you know what the worry would be, Kev? We didn't really hear much out of Shane Doan until the end of last year and saw like the toll that it took on him. If this season continues the way it's going for Arizona, we might hear something at the end of the year from Ekman-Larsson, like just a little hint as to how frustrating this could be.
Well, I mean, if that's the case, then I would agree that he has to be traded. But I think this is what I was saying, from the franchise perspective, I think they see it would be disastrous if they have to trade Ekman-Larsson. Because you'll get some stuff back, but I mean, this is a guy that's advanced in his career, and as you said, on a yearly basis has the potential to be one of the top defensemen in the league, and he really is like crucial for a guy like Keller, because his position game is so strong, and that they have some pieces to build on. I mean, Domi's a player, Keller's a player. There's some players on this team, and to be honest, like, it's pretty clear that they haven't connected with Tocchet, because that defense should be better.
Now, to answer your question, the team that's out of the playoffs right now that I think will be in it, to me, is Anaheim, because they'll get all their players back, and it's miraculous that they're 500 right now with Getzlaf, Kessler, Fowler all out of the lineup. But the team that's out of the playoffs right now, and I watched them last night against Washington, Kevin, I don't know what's going on with Edmonton, whether they started to tune out McClellan or not, or whether Cam Talbot has resorted back to what he was with the Rangers, which was a backup, which I don't think is the case. But they're just not playing cohesively, and they have to lump together Draisaitl and McDavid to get any kind of offense, and that's not a winning formula. They got to separate those two.
I was completely wrong on Edmonton. I really felt like they had turned the corner. I thought they were going to be at 104, 106, 108 points this season. Like, I thought they were ready to go. And, but what's funny is, and we've talked about this before, but when you start trying to fix a problem, sometimes you create others. And they wanted to improve their defense, and they felt like they needed to get rid of Jordan Eberle. And now all of a sudden, what are they short of? They need one more scorer.
Yeah.
Well, Peter's playing pretty good now that he's back up. We have to give him that.
Yeah. No.
Yeah. You know what the weird thing is, Kev? This is what I've noticed. I've watched more Edmonton lately to try and figure out this problem too, because this is really the question of the year. Like, why are they failing? And the thing that I keep coming back to is they literally only have two defensemen in Klefbom or Nurse that, unless they're on the ice, it just seems like the puck is dead trying to get up the ice. If you pass it back to a defenseman, it doesn't get back to the right players. And it just seems like every other defender they have stalls their offense. They don't have a lot of gifted puck movers and skilled defensemen in that regard. They got a lot of shot blocking defensemen, but that's only good when you're scoring tons of goals. They need push from the blue line that they're not getting.
I didn't think they would miss Sekera as much as
but they're missing them, yeah.
Yeah, well, and I just looked this up too, that Lucic has only scored like 13 even strength goals since he got there.
I know.
That's crazy.
Like that, they need him to be better 5-on-5 than he has been as well. And it's always is the case. It's everything.
Yeah, I don't think it's Talbot though. I've watched Talbot, and to be honest, I think he's actually been really good. I do. I don't think he's the problem.
Well, I thought he was poor early, but I think he's picked it up.
That's true. That's fair. He did start off slow.
And they were getting a lot out of guys like Maroon. I mean, there are some players on that team that are better. There were some players on the team that were playing way better than they should have been playing last year when you look back at it. I mean,
and that's the McDavid effect. I mean,
right,
Patrick. I always said Patrick Maroon was the B.J. McDonald of the 2017 season, a guy who played with Gretzky and scored almost 50 goals. I mean, that's Patrick Maroon really did nothing in his career until he played with McDavid. And
is that B.J. McDonald or B.J. Honeycutt? Because he had the same thing go on.
How about Rob Brown? He's the Rob Brown of this. That's another one I always think of.
Rob Brown, yeah. Al Secord.
Finally, before we go, the last thing I asked the fans, and they had really definitive opinions on this one. Who among these four teams, who are often picked near the bottom, is the most for real? All right, Carolina, Vancouver, Detroit, or Colorado?
Colorado.
Four teams that you think is the most for real?
Colorado.
You got Colorado?
Yep. Two reasons. The biggest reason is Varlamov.
Yes.
And then the second biggest reason is Rantanen's really having like a big year for them. And so I think that combination has been really, really good for them. And Gerard has definitely helped their second power play a lot.
Just to be different, I actually agree with the Colorado, but just to be a little different, I'm going to go with Detroit only because they have somehow, we were talking about defenses that just sort of figured out, like their defense isn't any better than it was last season, but they've sort of learned to play within themselves, and it's okay. Jimmy Howard has really been good, and they have some interesting forwards like Mantha and Dylan Larkin and Anthony Ciu. Those guys can really play, and they can create some stuff. And if they could get Nyquist and Tatar going, they're not a great team, but could they challenge for a playoff spot? Yeah, maybe.
Yeah,
I would have to go along with Colorado, but the team that I have said from the beginning of the year that I thought was going to challenge for a playoff spot, and I still think they could, again, Kevin, I'm thinking too much trade here, but Carolina, if they can get themselves a little more scoring. I've been saying since the beginning of the year they needed to add one more scorer, and they've got what other teams need, which is excess on defense. They could trade one of their young defensemen, whether it be Hayden Fleury or was it McEwen or even Noah Hannafin, if they could get themselves a top line winger or a second line center, that I think would help them immeasurably to get into the playoffs.
Yeah, I think I think all of these four teams are really in the same boat to me. But Detroit would be my first pick as well, just because of.
So what boat are the Devils in?
No, the Devils are they're way above this right now because they are these 4 teams are all on the outside looking in right now, but they're all.
I know, but they weren't in the last question either, but they seem to be eluding all of these things.
No, I know they were in the top question, which was who will most likely fall out, which everybody put in Vegas. But the second one that people picked after Vegas, because Vegas is the obvious pick, I probably should have just left them out there, was the New Jersey Devils. That over the Islanders, Winnipeg, and LA. You guys all sort of.
I'm not sold on that anymore. I think the Devils have proved it to me. They're going to stay in it.
But the fans overwhelmingly voted for Carolina as at 60% in this over. Vancouver at 17, Detroit 14, and Colorado 11. So the fan base really thinks Carolina's for real.
Well,
I haven't seen enough out of Darling.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and that's and I mean, I will always be skeptical.
For a couple of reasons, Mike, because. Normally I am skeptical of polls like this, but our website does not love the Carolina Hurricanes. Okay, I'm going to throw that out right now. That is something like Vancouver, Detroit, Colorado. They all have bigger fan bases than the Carolina Hurricanes have. So
it's probably because we have a sizable portion that follows the website in Buffalo, and there is no more hated team in Buffalo than Carolina because of 2006.
All the more reason that Carolina being up top on this is really something to me. Like that.
I am skeptical of Darling too, but their defense is really good, and this is Justin Falk is not having a good year right now.
No, not yet.
But I think he's a very good defenseman, and they have some good young forwards. They added Justin Williams. There's just that one piece that's missing, and maybe Ron Francis just keeps his cards close to his vest and doesn't move one of those defensemen, but. With Hanifin looking for a big contract next year and these young guys like Bean and Fleury pushing for jobs, I don't know how he doesn't, take the advantage of having all these excess defensemen and making a move.
Yeah.
Who they really needed? They needed Matt Duchene. That was
that would have done it for him. That would have been like an Eric Stahl sort of addition for that team. Yeah.
And they probably could need that deal at some point, but you can't fault Sakic for who he got. But
no, he made a good trade. So finally, the I guess got a couple of requests from Twitter of people who wanted to hear your opinions on the other 2 questions. So I'll throw them out to you real fast because we got to go. But everybody, so the surprise team currently not in the playoffs in the West. I know you said Anaheim, Mike, but the other 4 teams, 4 choices were Chicago, Anaheim, Edmonton, and Minnesota. These are 4 teams that everybody had in the play. Maybe Chicago. Some people didn't have Chicago. I didn't have Chicago. But of those 4 teams, Chicago, Anaheim, Edmonton, Minnesota, you're staying with Anaheim, I guess, Mike.
Correct. Yes.
Where's everybody else?
I'm surprised Edmonton's not in the playoffs. I didn't think they were a Stanley Cup team, but I'm very surprised they're not in the playoffs.
Yeah. I would take. Boy, that's a tough one because Edmonton or Anaheim is a good choice here. I would take. I'm going to go with Edmonton too.
Edmonton, yeah. And that Chicago is so close, but the Chicago was.
We can explain away Anaheim to injuries. We can't explain away why Edmonton.
Yeah, our fans went with Chicago. And in the East, the final one: New York Rangers, Canadiens, Flyers, Bruins, or Sabres. Who's going to make the playoffs of those guys?
I think the Rangers will make it.
Rangers. I think the Sabres are closer to 31st place than they are making the playoffs. The way things are going right now, they're not getting consistent goaltending out of Leonard. Eichel is playing well, but not as well as people. And I think it's the pressure of the big contract.
Yeah, there's still the talent around him, Mike. I still don't think he's got the right line. We're years into his career, and he doesn't have a set line.
And for the 3rd year in a row, I have never seen a team lose more defensemen in my life than the Buffalo Sabres. Matt Tennyson is on the top pairing right now because Ristolainen and Marco Scandella are out. That's how bad it is.
Yeah.
I'm going Rangers too. They're playing too well right now.
Yeah, they're playing too well right now. I agree. All right, well, thanks so much, guys, for everything. Thanks for watching, subscribing. Go to patreon.com/hockey to support us. We appreciate that. Enjoy the games tonight. We will be back again tomorrow. Remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey. Talk to you soon.